record, we shall begin. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all again, and welcome to the fourth webinar in the FASTER project webinar series. Today, we are going to be talking about maintenance of electric vehicles. So, you know, how reliable are they? How easy are they to fix? How expensive are they to fix? You know, do you need any specialist training, even just to change a tire? So we're going to be covering all of these concerns and then some. And if you are a mechanic who's wondering about how to get into EV maintenance, this will be of particular interest to you, because this evening we're going to be joined by some absolute legends in the EV mechanic world. We've got Matt Cleevely from Cleevely EV. We've got Pete Melville from HEVRA, and we've also got Euan Campbell from Electron Garage. And then later today, we're going to be joined by Gill Nowell from LV to discuss the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles versus petrol and diesel. And of course, with the cost of living crisis that we've got at the moment and the prices spiraling on petrol, diesel and electricity, there's obviously been a significant amount of movement in those calculations recently. So that will no doubt be of great interest. And actually, I'm sure that the rest of the panelists this evening will have some interesting stories about how much they're saving or not on EV ownership. But first of all, we'll hand over to Donal Monaghan from the FASTER project to give us an update on how the project is progressing.
Thank you, Euan. Apologies, I am just working on the back end here of the system and getting some of our speakers sorted with their logins. So I suppose just a very warm welcome to you all, and we're delighted to see so many of you this evening because it is probably the nicest evening that we've had all year. So we didn't expect to see quite as many of you. So thank you for joining us, and thank you especially to our panelists this evening for taking time out of their busy schedules. As Euan has said, I just want to give you, I suppose, a very quick update on where we are with various different aspects of the FASTER project. I think the key area, and I know the area that will be of interest to quite a lot of you, is the area of the project infrastructure itself. As you're aware, by this point, the FASTER project will be covering 3 areas: Northern Ireland, Scotland, and the Republic of Ireland. And we're at some different points in each of the regions. In Scotland, the procurement process for the charging infrastructure is being led by our project colleagues at Hitrans. And earlier this summer, they had a public tender exercise, which resulted in a non-award, as the costs that had been proposed by the prospective suppliers were beyond the scope of the project budget. So revisions are currently being made to the tender documentation, and prior information notice has been published on the relevant procurement websites and on the official journal of the European Union, which we're required to do under the funding regulations, to advise that the tender documents will be available again in September. So it's hoped that a supplier for Scotland will be appointed in late autumn, with the installation work to begin then towards the end of this year, or at the latest very early in 2023. In Northern Ireland, University of Ulster are overseeing the procurement process for the infrastructure here. And at the moment, they're finalising their work with the DNO and the local councils on the various site assessment works that have been ongoing. And a public tender exercise will be live in the autumn for Northern Ireland, with a view to appointing a supplier before the end of this year. And again, installation works to begin in early 2023. Finally, Louth County Council are overseeing infrastructure procurement for the Republic of Ireland border region. And again, they've been working with ESB representatives as well as local councils in the border region to complete the site assessment work. And again, we'll be moving forward with the procurement exercise in September, with a view to appointing a supplier before the end of this year. And again, installation work is scheduled for the beginning of 2023. My apologies if you can hear some hammering or drilling going on in the background. We're having some new floors laid here in the house at the moment, so my apologies for that if you can hear anything. Just one of the other areas that I'm working on at the minute, we are launching our first major media campaign for the FASTER project later this month. And our advertisements will go live across radio, press, and online channels across each of the project regions. The key messages that we'll be focusing on are the potential cost savings that can be achieved by making a switch to electric, and the environmental benefits of EV use. The campaign has been developed in association with our media partner, Crow Group, and also our press partner, Diego Communications. And we look forward to seeing the impact of that activity in the coming weeks. So do keep an eye out for the advertisement and the campaign content in local and regional press, and of course on the online channels as well. Hopefully at this point you'll also have seen the first of our EV Talk review films hosted by Euan. The first film was focused on the Honda E, and so far the feedback from that has been overwhelmingly positive. Lots of great feedback and comments on the video, so we're delighted with that. If you haven't had a chance to see or to watch the film yet, I'll pop the link into the chat at some point when I finish my presentation here. And just to let you know that the second episode in that series will be going live on the week commencing 22nd of August. So you don't have too long to wait for the next installment. And in that film, we will be looking at the Fiat 500e. So another really great option there. And finally, I just wanted to make mention of the Interreg survey, which I know a lot of you supported us with recently. I'm delighted to say that we had 1,775 responses to the survey, and that was up around 20% on the number of responses that we had to the survey last year, so really positive. At the minute, the data is being analysed, and we would hope to announce the results and data from that as part of our media activity in the beginning of September. So again, we'll pick up on that in the September webinar, but it's just something for you to look out for. So some interesting data coming from that survey as well. So really useful for us at the project team. And finally, I would just add that we have been building up a number of driver testimonials, as well as stories from fleet operators over the past few months. And if anyone out there would like to share their story with us, whether from a personal perspective as an electric vehicle driver, or if there's any fleet operators out there, please do get in touch with me directly, or there's details on the FASTER project website on how you can get involved in that side of things. So that's really all I wanted to say this evening. I'll pass back now to Euan and to the rest of the panel for the main discussion of the evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Donal. I think actually we can, before we introduce our panelists for the evening, we can launch proceedings with our first poll of the evening. Donal, do you have that handy?
I do.
So there we go, a little bit of audience interaction for you just whilst we're waiting on that popping up. Oh, there we go. So EV servicing. Are you, as an EV driver or prospective EV driver, more or less worried about getting an EV repaired or serviced than a petrol or a diesel vehicle? And what will be interesting to see is if opinions on this one shift any over the course of the evening. Obviously, as we'll be talking to some professionals in that regard, I'll just give you about 30 seconds or so to finish your answers. We've got a very high turnout already. There we go. But just whilst we're waiting on the answers coming through, a huge thank you to Rick, Callum, and Ollie from Generate Media, with whom I filmed the Honda E and all the other EV reviews for the Faster project at the Arnold Clark Innovation Centre. Huge thanks to them as well. So the EVs that you see that we're test driving, I think just about all of them are still available at the Arnold Clark Innovation Centre in Glasgow. You can pop along and test drive them. There's no pressure to buy. It's a fantastic EV emporium, and it's just a font of knowledge as well. So definitely worth checking out if you are in or near or passing by Glasgow. So now I can share with you the results of the first poll. So interestingly, there's quite a lot of confidence about EV maintenance. Generally, people are less worried, but there's still a sizable proportion, almost a third of you, are more worried than you would be for a petrol or diesel car about how to service an EV when something needs to be done or when something has gone wrong. So let's find out just how worried you need to be. So in that case, let's introduce, we have Gill as well. Hello, Gill has just joined us this evening. Gill will be discussing total cost of ownership with us later, but I would like to bring to the panel just now Wayne Campbell from Electron Garage, Pete Melville from HEVRA, the Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Repair Alliance, and we also have Matt Cleevely from Cleevely EV. If you can all switch on your cameras and mics, great to have you on board this evening to talk tech with us and to talk service and maintenance. We should have Wayne switching on his camera very shortly. Hopefully, there we go. Yep, hooray. We have a full complement. Fantastic. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. So my first question for you all is, and I suppose we'll start with Pete, since you are of the Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Repair Alliance. Well, so if you want to very quickly tell us exactly what HEVRA is and what HEVRA does, actually. It's quite an exciting organisation, first and foremost.
Yeah, thanks, Euan. So, as you say, HEVRA is the Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Repair Alliance, and what we aim to do is put drivers in touch with good garages for electric vehicles. And as part of that, we make those good garages even better. So as an alliance, we have our own research and development department where we will find out how every EV that we support works. We'll find out about particular systems and how they work, and anything else that we can do in order to support those garages. And then we also provide all the garages with technical support as well. So if they come across a strange issue, we can say, oh, well, you know, we know about this, check this, and this is what you need to do. And equally, we could add that to our research list, so we could say, oh, well, actually, you know, this is something we need to know more about, and we'll find out all the answers in order to get the cars fixed.
Superb. And we'll obviously do kind of in-depth intros for everyone, but the first question of the evening for our panelists is, what components does an electric vehicle have that a petrol or diesel car does not? So in your experience of being under the bonnet of so many of these vehicles, what would you say is the main difference then in terms of things that you do have to deal with you wouldn't have on a petrol or a diesel car?
Obviously we've got an electric motor and we've got a battery. Now, virtually all modern electric vehicles actually use an AC motor. So between the battery and the motor, we have something called an inverter, and that creates the AC electricity that we need to drive the motor. So there are obviously additional components. We also have a charger within the vehicle. So a lot of people think the charger is the thing that you have on the front of your house. But that's basically a safety interface to get mains electricity into the car, and the actual charger is within the car, and that converts that mains electricity into the right sort of electricity to charge the battery. As well as that, we have something called a DC-DC converter, which replaces the alternator in a traditional car, so that provides power for all of your low voltage systems like your headlights and things like that. Then we also, and it's depends on the make and model of the car, but we'll also have some changes to the braking system and the cabin heating as well, just because they're normally integrated into the combustion engine system, but they need to be integrated into the electric vehicle in a slightly different way.
Oh, we have someone typing frantically in the background, I think. But yeah, no, that is a really good rundown on that. And I suppose that there's the kind of opposite end of that question as well, Matt. So Matt Cleevely of Cleevely EV, of course, you started off in internal combustion mechanics, didn't you? And then you decided you wanted to be good. And you're now one of the UK's leading specialist mechanics and part of HEVRA, aren't you? Tell us a bit more about your operations first.
Yeah, so for me, it was 25 years in the motor industry, cutting my teeth on doing plugs and points and dwell angles and ignition timing and things like that, and just wanted to know, because I was going to be taking over the family business, which is 60 years old this year, what the next step was for both my family business and my career. So already being passionate about renewable energy, we've got solar on our house and have done for a number of years now. I wanted to look at and saw EV as the next step, really, for both my trade and for me personally. So bought an early leaf, got very frustrated with the buying experience through the main dealers who have no idea about EVs at all. Went to a few EV meets, met up with Pete, said about my plans, and just set about then changing my traditional ICE business over to EV gradually by creating Cleevely EV alongside Cleevely Motors, and the two run harmoniously most of the time in the same workshop now. And we're getting the staff on board, got a number of my staff trained, but I was just well aware that for adoption to increase, there needed to be an independent presence that says, come on, bring your car to us, we'll look after it, you don't need to go to the main dealer. And I must say, as a HEVRA garage, we couldn't do what we do without Pete's help as well. So the HEVRA membership part is invaluable for us. We see a lot of things first time round, getting early adopters cars in, trying some new first fixes, and just really getting in depth, keeping old EVs on the road because of the sustainable value as much as anything else.
And actually, yeah, in that case, I'm going to change the question I was going to ask you, but we'll save that one for Wayne. But you kind of alluded to a really good point. So yes, there are components that outside of dealers, this will be the first time that an independent mechanic's really looked at this. But generally speaking, how reliable are EV specific components, and how reliable are EVs versus petrol or diesel cars? You know, do they present more of an issue, or do they generally run for a lot longer without the same kind of downtime that you would expect with a petrol car as it ages?
It's a difficult one, because being a garage, you only see broken cars. But for the number of vehicles that are out there on the road, and the ones that we sell as well, generally EVs are a lot more reliable because there are less moving components. Some of the earlier cars have fallen foul of some electronics problems that we've, with Pete's help, have been fixing over the last few years. But that's by and large, they're a lot more reliable EVs, even the older generation cars, than a lot of petrol or diesel. They certainly take a lot less maintenance, but we have a large stock of suspension items, because we have noticed slightly more premature wear on suspension components due to the weight of the car, over and above maybe that of an ICE vehicle. So, but that's the only sort of drawback from what we're seeing through the workshop.
Yeah, although I suppose although the suspension is wearing a little bit faster in some cases, the brake wear is not, is it, Wayne? So we'll introduce you now for, obviously, Wayne Campbell, Electron Garage. Tell us more, because I know that you have well, a little bit about Electron Garage, because I know you've been dabbling in all sorts of green tech, not just EVs, for some time now. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what Electron Garage does, first and foremost.
So yeah, coming from a different angle, we're taking existing ICE vehicles and removing them off their smelly parts, and putting full electric drivetrain in and batteries, which comes with challenges. But from a brakes perspective, speaking about my own car, we've done 93,000 miles in my car, and I've only recently replaced the brakes all round, which was a cost about £600. And that's basically all I've had to do to that car in 93,000 miles. If that was a similar car, like an Audi or something like that, because I've had one of them in the past, I would have been spending probably 4 or 5 times as much as that over the course of that 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, easily. I mean, yeah, the brakes on a typical petrol or diesel car, you're looking at what, 40-ish thousand miles lifespan most. It's the regenerative braking, isn't it? So the fact that as soon as you lift your foot off the throttle, the electric motor basically goes into reverse principles and takes the momentum of the car and turns it into electricity that charges the battery. So you get more range and you get less expense and more brake lifespan, etc. But yeah, you're saying about removing all of the internal combustion parts. So you are perfectly placed for the question, which I've been itching to ask, which is what components does an electric vehicle not have that a petrol or diesel car does?
Well, the fuel tank for one, the engine, which a lot of people don't realise is very inefficient, gearbox, a lot of moving parts in that engine, and just to keep it going, plugs, points, although we're into electronic ignition now, but there's just hundreds and hundreds of parts that can go wrong with that engine.
Hundreds versus like how many in an electric motor? It's a handful. It's single digits, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I suppose quick fire from Matt and Pete as well. Any other components that are missing? I mean, exhaust gas regulator comes to mind for me. Timing belt, which obviously is part of the engine. But any other kind of notorious things that will go wrong and be a complete misery for you that you no longer have to worry about?
Well, there's no clutch. If it's a manual, then that's a wearing component. Exhaust systems that corrode and fall off. And today, actually, I was pricing up a VW Transporter camshaft change where a camshaft's worn. I mean, the guy's looking at a £2,500 repair. So it's not cheap to keep a petrol or diesel vehicle on the road anymore.
No, true.
Components are expensive. There's a lot of them.
That is really interesting. I mean, you don't think about the cost of the components going up, as well as the cost of fuel. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, between the three of you, you were listing the things that have gone wrong with the petrol and diesel cars I owned before switching to electric. And yeah, from personal experience of driving EVs since 2009, yeah, the uptime of an electric vehicle is just so much more because there's less to go wrong, I suppose. But yeah, really interesting stuff. And I suppose we've kind of touched upon this. Well, Wayne, you were saying about sort of 90,000 miles before anything of note had to be done to your car. But in the experience of all three of you, how long can an electric vehicle run without any major issues? That doesn't include things like even brake pad or tire replacement. That's just gradual wear and tear. But I'm talking about something that would incapacitate the vehicle otherwise. How long could an EV run versus the likes of a petrol or diesel car?
I would say that my car has probably got another 90,000 miles in it before I see any significant degradation of the battery. I think I've lost about, it's about 1% on range in 93,000. Yeah, so
not bad. And that's not a particularly young car, is it? It's what, 2016, 2015?
2015, yeah, it was new 2015, yeah.
Yeah, so the people the naysayers who say, oh, the batteries only last 8 years, then I hate to tell you, Wayne, but you're on for a massive downward trajectory this year from if the naysayers are to be believed. So I think it's time for our next poll question before we continue this chat. Don't know if you have that ready for us. Any second now. But yeah, as I say, we had a few maintenance related questions for you. Here we go. So EV reliability. So this one's for the EV owners in the room. How has the reliability of your EV been versus petrol or diesel vehicles that they replaced? So, have you seen an improvement, or has it been about the same? Has it been worse? The results are flooding in, but I'll give you another 10 seconds to answer, and then we can share the results. But I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise. I have said that if you had more issues than with a petrol or diesel car, to tell us why in the chat. So please do give us that indication in the chat. So there we go. These are the results. And okay, so 2 out of 31 have said that their EV has been less reliable thus far. I'll be interested to find out why. But generally speaking, reliability seems to, from the experience of EV owners, seems to be greatly improved or much of a muchness. Gill has a question actually regarding this. So yeah, Gill, do come in.
Thanks very much, and hi everybody. Really pleased to be able to join you this evening. So my question really is just going back to the battery point, because a lot of my job at LV and Electrics is to help people overcome, all the fear, uncertainty and doubt. And what I'm hearing more and more is that actually people really are worried that they're going to have to replace the battery in a few years. With their electric car when they're thinking about making the switch, and particularly with secondhand as well. So that's one thing. And then I suppose my second observational question is that on tyres. So given that electric cars are generally a little bit heavier than their petrol and diesel counterparts, is it true to say that there is more wear and tear on tyres, and kind of how does that manifest itself?
So Matt, I think you're actually quite well positioned to answer this via James, who runs the mobile servicing arm of your division. So he's constantly running up and down the country in an MG electric car that's been converted to a van. I presume you're up to scratch with his latest tyre change, which managed to rack up some considerable mileage.
Yeah, I believe it was 43,000 miles before he needed to replace his tires on the MG, and he absolutely loves that car and virtually lives in it now. So yeah, that's covered a really good amount of mileage. We see a lot of Tesla through our workshop. They tend to be quite heavy on tire wear, and my own Model 3, I managed 22,000 miles out of the standard 18-inch tires, Michelin's, before I needed to replace them. So, I mean, that's not too bad, and I'd probably say it's around average. I have heard some horror stories about ID3s running out their tires within 10,000 miles, but I haven't actually witnessed that myself as yet, because I imagine a lot of them are leased or are heading back to the main dealers still. But yes, they are. Do they wear tires prematurely than anything else? I don't think it's a massive issue to worry about, and it will all depend on driving style as well.
I think, yeah, you'd have to be intensely throttle happy about it. And I suppose the instant response of the throttle in an EV does encourage some people initially to, to plant it away from the traffic lights just because of the novelty of it. Donald has just opened the chat to everyone. Apparently, sorry, a few of you had been trying to get in on the chat and it hadn't been open. Sorry, so chat away. But yeah, sorry, you were saying, Matt.
Well, I was only going to say that. So Gill's got a Kia Niro, e-Niro, and I mean, the torque on them is phenomenal, and in a sporty driving mode, you can spin the wheels up quite easily with a decent acceleration. So that will lead to premature tyre wear, but the Carver that I'm now running around in, a bit less harder to spin the wheels up in.
Yeah, indeed. And I will add there, Mark, that I rarely go into sports mode, because I find it quite terrifying, because it is so super responsive that my heart can't cope. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
True. No worries. So I suppose that kind of topic almost does kind of lend on quite well to the next question, which obviously tires is one thing that you would need to make sure that it passes its MOT. But when it comes to MOTing or servicing an electric vehicle, what's involved? What's the typical procedure, and who can do that? So I suppose, well, Pete, you speak on behalf of so many EV specialist garages. What do they need to know? What qualifications do they need to be able to service an EV?
Okay, well, this it depends from what way you look at it. Is the short answer. So from the legal point of view, there are surprisingly few qualifications you need to start a garage of any sort, and that does include an electric vehicle garage. However, electric vehicles are covered by other rules such as Electricity at Work Act and things like that. So what we actually found, and this is one of the reasons that we set up HEVRA, is which is a voluntary standard for garages. Garages who repair electric vehicles don't have to be HEVRA members, but it's actually a way of, because we provide technical support to the garages as well, and we provide all that information about the cars, the customer can be sure that not only have you got the qualifications, but the garage has the whole package, if you like. So there are qualifications out there. So the qualifications will typically teach you the basic principles of how things work, how to safely work on high voltage system and things like that. But from the point of view of getting any car in the door and being able to fix it, there isn't a qualification that exists in order to do that. And if there was, it would take a very long time to get that qualification, and it would be out of date almost as soon as you had it, because obviously the pace of change is pretty fast in this industry.
True. Just noticing on the chat, there's some really good questions coming in. I would ask if you repost those in the question and answer rather than the chat, the Q&A. That means it won't just get lost in the chat, and we'll be able to to pick up on that at the end. Couple of points. The two people who'd said about reliability being worse with their EV than their ICE, one of them had a Hyundai Kona, which had the battery recall. There was a defect from LG Chem, the manufacturer, with the way that some of the cells were made. So yeah, out of an abundance of caution, they replaced them all. That's, to be honest, I'm not surprised. That was one of the ones. And funnily enough, the other one was an ID3, and it was software related. And yeah, we all, I suppose all the mechanics in the room, yeah, I can see he's nodding away. Yeah, they basically launched that car with Windows Vista on it, and had to update the software. But yeah, on the tires as well. So Alan has got an Ioniq from 2020. It's just had 30,000 mile service done, and the tires are less than half worn. Meanwhile, someone has an e-Niro. Tires are getting changed at 30,000 miles. So an exceptionally good example, and probably not too dissimilar to internal combustion engine example there. But yeah, I see, Brendan, you have a really good question about Nissan cells. We'll come back to that at the end of this. In terms of the complexity of servicing an electric vehicle, the annual service and then the MOT, is that harder or is it easier than for a petrol, a diesel, or a hybrid car? Who wants to answer? Well, I suppose, Matt, you'll be doing these quite a lot with the garage, since you've got internal combustion and electric servicing.
Yeah, so when it comes to the MOT, that's a legal requirement, and it is a very basic minimum standard inspection. It's made easier on an EV because you don't have to do a statutory emissions test, because it's pointless. But otherwise, it is all the same checks: your seatbelt checks, your light checks, your washers, your wipers, your headlight aims. It's still a car. It's still got steering, suspension, brakes. They all need to be efficient. They all need to be working correctly. There need to be no significant play in it. When you're underneath the vehicle, you're obviously not checking whether the exhaust is going to fall off because it's not there, but you are checking security of battery. There are additional things that you have to, as an MOT tester, look at the high voltage cabling, and that is a failable item. If the high voltage cabling is damaged in any way or showing signs of fatigue, then that is a failable item under the new MOT rules. So although an MOT is quicker because you don't have to do an emissions test, it's still a minimum sort of half an hour inspection of the vehicle to make sure it meets a minimum standard. When it comes to servicing, again, it's a car. I mean, what you're not doing is doing an oil and filter change. So there are less components to replace, but it still has a pollen filter, cabin filter to do. There is still a brake fluid check to do, battery coolant checks to do, 12-volt battery checks to do, door hinges, steering components, things that move that need to be lubricated. So there are still a number of checks to do. And unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of EV owners forgetting the responsibility of having their car serviced because they think that there isn't as much to do on them. Just because it doesn't have an engine doesn't mean that it doesn't need servicing.
Oh no, definitely. You want to be making sure that that car is not just fit to be on the road, but is in its kind of happy spot. And I suppose that means you'd be improving the efficiency of the vehicle as well, just by making sure that everything is optimal. So definitely worth checking out at your local HEVRA approved garage, although for servicing doesn't even need to be, as we discussed, really, you know, an EV specialist. Technically anyone can do that, really, but good to go to the people who deal with these cars every day. Donal, our next poll question, I believe, is due now, so let's see what we've got for our audience. And just whilst we're waiting on that poll question coming up, there we go, servicing locations. So on that note, EV owners, where do you get your EV serviced or repaired? So do you typically go to the same garage you would have gone to with your petrol or your diesel car? Do you take it to the dealership where you bought the car? Do you take it to a HEVRA specialist garage? Do you use mobile EV servicing? And actually, whilst we're doing that, one topic is that you can, in theory, have your EV serviced on your doorstep, because Matt, that's something that your business offers, doesn't it? Cleevely EV Mobile via James, as we mentioned, with his MG van going up and down the country.
Yeah, modern life is about convenience, and without having to change engine oil as regularly. I just saw it as an opportunity to add a convenience element to our EV servicing offering, because it can be done at people's workplaces and driveways. So it was just about allowing that extra bit of convenience and give people more options into having repairs, and it's proved very popular, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on that note, that MG van had done 40,000 miles. How many months old is it? Because it's not even years, it's months it's done that in, which shows you just how you know, the kind of length and breadth of the country that you've been covering.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around 8 months old now.
I mean, that's incredible. The average mileage in the UK for a typical family car is about 8,000 miles, if I recall correctly. So that just shows you the sheer lengths of it. But I mean, are there, you know, where is the kind of the red line with the service? Actually, just before we come back to that, most people saying that they're going to the dealership where they borrow the car. Oh, that was an autocorrect. Where they bought the car. So yeah, I mean, that's understandable. A lot of EVs, especially, well, the majority of EVs on the road now are very new. There are obviously older ones, but there's been exponential growth recently. So understandable, you would take it back to the dealer, especially. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's been a myth for a long time, and not just with EVs, with petrol and diesel cars as well. The dealerships will tell you that you have to have it serviced with them to maintain, and that's never been the case. Due to a ruling called block exemption, you have the right to choose where your car is serviced. And as long as the servicing agent uses OE spec parts and follows the service schedule, it can be done anywhere.
There we go. So it's not a warranty issue at all. That's actually news to me as well. Because yeah, similarly, I've seen quite a few worried people in social media groups saying, "Oh no, I need to go here," but no. And you'd probably end up saving a fortune going for an independent HEVRA specialist. So valuable lesson learned there. Thank you. Moving on, I suppose when it comes to servicing an electric vehicle, as a mechanic looking to get into EVs, you know, what's most likely to go wrong, and then typically how easy is it to service that? I suppose, well, if we ask yourself, Wayne, for what have you seen from all of your dealings with ripping out components on EVs and kind of, you know, upgrading and replacing, what's the most likely to cause issues?
I think it's always worthwhile to strip the brakes down and clean them, because, well, 9 times out of 10 the rear brakes don't get used, so you would really be changing them because of the lack of use. So it's worthwhile to do a brake strip down for any electric vehicle, and then the rest of the stuff is just, you know, it's pretty much the same as a petrol or diesel car. You know, shock absorbers, steering linkages, that sort of thing.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because I have had issues with brake corrosion, not brake wear. And that's, yeah. So EV drivers out there, make sure that once every week or two, you know, you do give a decent stomp on the brakes when it's safe to do so, just to kind of clear off that rust. Would that be a fair top tip to give, or is that? Yeah.
And some vehicles have maybe got different settings for regen, so it's better to. I know most people, you know, if they're doing short journeys, they want to have the maximum regen, but it's worthwhile just maybe once a month to set that to the lowest regen and give it a good blast and a good rework of the brakes, sort of thing. Yeah.
There's almost like a bell curve with brake lifespan, isn't there? So there's like the petrol and diesel, no regens kind of down here somewhere, or if you have the EV with the regen pretty much switched off, and then it gets to the point where you're getting, using regen a lot, but then doing that kind of once a month, as you said, you just kind of clean the brakes off, but then you have a maximum regen on all the time. And it corrodes and you have to replace it because it's an MOT thing. So that's a really important top tip. And to be honest, that's probably for a lot of drivers going to be one of the more problematic components, a set of brake pads for EVs, whereas the same cannot be said of a petrol car where you're going to need to change the timing belt, or the clutch is starting to give up and make horrible smells and be like, yeah, it's probably time to get that dealt with, or the exhaust falls off, everything we were talking about before. So yeah, I suppose, Pete, we've already covered. Do we need any specialist training to service an electric vehicle? Well, to MOT it, no, but to service it, once you get into the high voltage, remind me, what are the actual qualifications that would be required to get your hands on the high voltage stuff if and when it does go wrong?
So there's national occupational standards that set levels of qualifications for electric vehicle repair. So just to give you a very quick run through of what they are, you have a level 1 qualification that basically means you're allowed to look at it. A level 2 qualification means that you're aware of what the dangers are regarding the high voltage system and things like that, and you would work on parts of the car other than the high voltage system, but be suitably equipped with the knowledge to avoid the high voltage system, if you like. And then a level 3 qualification would allow you to work on the high voltage system when it's powered down. And then a level 4 qualification would allow you to work on the high voltage system whilst it's live. So that would, for example, be the case for things like battery repairs, because normally you would isolate the battery from the rest of the vehicle, and that would make the rest of the vehicle safe. But if you're working on the battery itself, it's not possible to do that, obviously. So that's when sort of the level 4 qualification would be required.
And typically, like, how long does that take? What does it cost, and where can you get that training?
So there's a number of training providers that offer those qualifications around the UK. The level to get a level 3, and Matt and Wayne can perhaps chip in here. I think, is it about a week to get a level 3 and then about another week to top that up to the level 4? Is that roughly speaking?
Yeah. So we're running via a trainer called Promoto. We're running training courses from our premises. They're not that regular, but every 3-4 months a training course runs, and Promoto are doing level 3 and level 4 within 4 days from our premises. So most often the case, it's Tuesday, Wednesday is level 2 and 3, Thursday, Friday is level 4, and it's an IMI qualification to the standard. And the delegates tend to come down into our workshop and they strip down a Prius because that's what the trainers use, but they're surrounded by us working on Teslas and Leaf batteries and other things, and find it highly stimulating and inspiring, actually seeing a garage that has a third of its daily intake as pure EV.
That's the point. I was going to say, like, you have basically an EV emporium on site, and the fact that you'd be able to get hands-on with all these different makes and models is invaluable. I've been lucky enough to swing by Cleevely EV before, and if you are a mechanic watching, wherever you are, it's worth heading to Cheltenham to Cleevely EV to get on one of those courses. And as for Promoto, Elliot from Promoto trained me back in the day. So if you're watching, hi Elliot, you're a legend. Yeah, genuinely really good setup. Pete approves. Really, really good setup that you've got there. And on that note, obviously, bearing in mind this is the FASTER project, which focuses not just on the rural west coast of Scotland, but the island of Ireland. So there's a bit of a sea in between Cheltenham and quite a lot of our viewers this evening. Are there any HEVRA members, and are there any sort of IMI training facilities in Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland that you're aware of?
So we do have HEVRA members in both Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland. In terms of the training in the Republic of Ireland, I don't know exactly what's offered in the Republic of Ireland, but most of our members over there did their training in the UK. So perhaps that answers that question.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm not sure actually if the HEVRA members in the Republic of Ireland show on the UK map. So if you're in the UK, it's hevra.org.uk. But if you're in Ireland, if you go to hevra.eu, that will definitely show any members in Ireland. They are at the moment a little bit more spread out than they are here in the UK, but hopefully that will change over time. So.
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube and you've checked the captions and those links aren't underneath it, then email Donal and tell him he's a bad man for not putting them there, because that's a really handy resource, because that answers my next question, which was, where can I find my local HEVRA mechanic? You've mentioned exactly where you can find it, whether you're in Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland or mainland Britain. So that is invaluable. Thank you. I presume the training requirements for Republic of Ireland are pretty much the same. There's not any significant differences for EV training then.
From our point of view, they're the same. I mean, from a legal compliance point of view, that does vary from country to country, but that be for any viewers outside the UK and Ireland to check the rules in their country. But from our point of view, we're not a compliance organisation. We're primarily a technical organisation, and from our point of view, the standards are the same.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. I would trust any of you to service my car and to get into the high voltage on it and so on. So yeah, genuinely, anyone who's been involved with HEVRA, yeah, you're grand in that sense. You're in safe hands. Actually, someone had a really good question in the chat. I just happened to notice. In fact, Jim Blair has mentioned his GTG training in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Wolverhampton for IMI as well. Really handy. But yeah, Gordon had asked, does HEVRA offer membership to DIYers, or is it just garages?
We don't, unfortunately. We only do it for professional car repair garages. So there's a number of challenges. I mean, I've got no problem with someone you know, repairing their car on their drive, as long as they know what they're doing and they're doing a good job, sort of thing. From our point of view, we exist to support the industry, and therefore we're open to anyone who works in the industry, if you like. And it's also very difficult to judge the skill level of someone who isn't within the trade with formal qualifications, because those electric vehicle qualifications we spoke about, they are for someone who is already familiar with petrol and diesel vehicles, and that wouldn't cover things like the brake, suspension, steering, all that sort of stuff. That purely covers the stuff that's different that we talked about earlier. So true.
But nonetheless, the HEVRA network is a font of knowledge. And if you are a DIYer, there's an off chance if you ask your friendly HEVRA mechanic for advice, and then obviously it's a case of, yeah, it's your responsibility to do what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the knowledge that you have and the thousands of pounds that you've managed to save on fixing electronics that a dealer would have said, oh, it's going to cost you thousands of pounds to replace this entire thing, and you've just gone in and been like, oh no, it's this one wee relay or whatever. The knowledge is incredible. I am keenly aware of the time, and as is typical with these webinars, the content has been so fascinating that we are running on. But I mean, conveniently, we've answered the other questions that I had on maintenance, which is for mechanics looking to specialize, where do you go? You go to HEVRA basically, and you go to your local IMI course provider. And you know, in terms of fixing your EV on your doorstep, Cleevely EV Mobile is fantastic. Obviously, if you're in Scotland, that's the point, Wayne. Electron Garage. At one point, you were doing servicing and so on, weren't you? But you're now doing so many exciting things. Don't know how much you want to talk about them at the moment, if it's still a bit hush hush. But
Yes, we've kind of let go of the service in a wee bit. It may come back when we expand into bigger premises, but yeah, we're concentrating on the conversion projects at the moment. Yeah.
Keep an eye on the Electron Garage. The stuff that's coming out of there is very exciting. That's all I'm going to say. But before we move on to cost of ownership, and finally officially welcome Gill onto the panel. Thank you so much for your patience. We do have another poll question for you, Donald, if you've got that at the ready. Should be flashing up any second now. There we go. So service pricing. This is a really good point. So EV owners has UEV been, oh my God, I'm all with the typos in these polls tonight. Has your EV been more or less expensive to service and repair than your previous internal combustion engine vehicle? I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to answer that one because time is against us. And yeah, I mean, this is a decent enough sample size. I'm going to share those results. Less expensive wins it hands down. And I don't know if any of the rest of the team have anything to comment on this, but I've definitely seen the likes of Nissan dealerships. The EV servicing is cheaper than petrol servicing, which is cheaper than diesel servicing, and it's probably just due to the improved reliability and less to go wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've actually noticed and heard that a lot of main dealers are very, very competitive, even at our level of pricing with EVs. So they've recognized that there is less to do and is pricing it accordingly, which is great for EV owners.
Absolutely.
As long as they're checking everything.
Yeah, there's definitely less of a kind of rip-off mentality. They've acknowledged that there's less to do. So yeah, that is very promising. Not all dealers have done that seemingly, or all brands, but some of them have definitely done that. But Gill, welcome to the panel. Good to see you. So Gill, I mean, you started off as a massive EV advocate, and you have been for years, and everyone on Twitter knows you. But recently you've taken up a very important role at LV as well, really getting the message out there about EVs. So tell us more about what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, thanks so much, Euan, and hi again, everybody. So yeah, so my current role, which I'm thoroughly enjoying, is as head of EV communications at LV and also electrics. So many of you have probably heard of LV. We're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, insurers of electric cars in the UK. You may not have heard of electrics. So we recently launched electrics to really help the driving community make an easy and informed switch to electric cars. So, you know, a lot of what I've been doing over the last 10 years is just trying to help people overcome, you know, that FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it comes to really taking the leap of sometimes a bit of faith and moving to electric. So through electrics, the idea is that we're just trying to make it simple. So you can come to us now for your electric car lease, for your home charger, and of course your insurance, and it's just all in one place. We've also got lots of really useful information and driver stories on the website. So please have a look. Maybe I'll drop it into the chat in a moment.
Please do.
Thank you. But thinking about total cost of ownership, I thought I'd just start with a couple of a bit of my own experience on actually, once you do start running an electric car, how markedly lower the running costs can be. So I've been driving electric cars for 10 years. I've owned one for 4 years now, almost. And I worked out that over 2 of those years, I've saved £1,600 in fuel costs, you know, which for me and the children is probably about 3 staycations on Anglesey or something like that. So that's how my head thinks about it. But the savings are really, really tangible, especially if you can charge at home off peak overnight. And actually, I think despite the increasing energy costs, which are impacting absolutely everybody, if you're fortunate enough to be able to get an electric car, if you're fortunate enough to be able to charge it at home off peak overnight, then that's where the real savings can be made. And I read recently in the media that for an average size family car, it costs about £100 to fill it with fuel these days. I could drive 4,000 electric miles for that money, which would be a mix of on and off peak home charging.
Wow.
which is, I think I'm probably quite a typical driver. My average annual mileage is about 8,000 miles. So that's half of my annual mileage for £100 worth of electricity.
And that's at today's prices as well. That's incredible.
Yeah, indeed, that's at today's prices. I don't do that much public charging, to be honest, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, in terms of public charging, those costs are creeping up, which is understandable. But that's all anecdotal, which is all well and good. But for me, I think the total cost of ownership, or TCO, is probably one of the best kept secrets of electric car ownership. If you don't drive an electric car, I think if you do, you're probably starting to become familiar, or are familiar with, how the cost savings do start to stack up. But if we can look at why is total cost of ownership so important, and what is it, first of all, I think it's really important because one of the reasons is that our research at LV shows that 45% of people are put off from buying or leasing an electric car due to the higher upfront sticker price. This will come down inevitably, but at the moment it's a fair concern. Although with the new MG, I think, which is at a really nice price point and everybody's raving about it at the moment, I think we can hopefully quite quickly in the next 6, 12, 24 months see the upfront sticker price come down. But what is total cost of ownership? So it's basically looking at all the costs involved, whether you buy your vehicle outright, whether you lease it, whether you PCP it, plus all the running costs involved. So that's whether it's fuel in the case of petrol or diesel cars or hybrids, or charging in the case of battery electric vehicles, plus maintenance, plus insurance, plus tax, plus even the cost of a home charger, if you need to factor that in. So Euan, I've absolutely got to give so much credit to you for the piece of work that we've done through LV on our electric car cost index. So Euan has quite brilliantly worked with us to crunch all the data and compared 13 electric cars with their petrol or diesel equivalents, really to try and demonstrate the true cost of being an electric car driver for people who are at the point of thinking about making the switch and might be still put off by the the higher upfront cost of electric. So what did that piece of work find? I think one of the outstanding stats that came out of that piece of work is that on average, electric cars are 47% cheaper to run. The cost to fuel in speech marks, inverted commas, an electric car for 8,000 miles a year is just over 60% cheaper. So we see petrol and diesel drivers paying about £730 a year more on fuel to do the same distance. But it's also the lower maintenance costs, and actually in many cases, and I think this maybe surprised us a little bit, the lower insurance costs in a lot of cases also drive down those annual running costs, which brings us to the figure of 47% cheaper to drive electric than petrol or diesel. We often get asked, so what are the best value electric cars out there? So at the time that we did this piece of work with Euan, I think it was back in, was it March, that we did the latest iteration of the electric car cost index. We found that the Nissan Leaf, the MG5 Long Range Excite, and the Mini Electric are the three of the best value electric cars. And those cars actually work out cheaper whether they're bought outright, whether they're leased, or whether they're bought via PCP. What we also found is that all 13 of the cars are cheaper if you buy the car up front and if you keep it for 7 years. 7 of the 13 electric cars we looked at are cheaper across a 4-year lease period, and 4 are cheaper on a 3-year PCP agreement. So I think kind of a key message that I'd like to try and get across is that even with those escalating fuel and energy costs, if you are looking for a new car, then, you know, just consider going electric, either new or secondhand. If you can get hold of a secondhand one, there is a bit of an issue with supply there at the moment, of course. And then if you can charge at home rather than filling up at a petrol station, it is far, far cheaper. And of course, it hopefully goes without saying, far better for the environment and for our local air quality. So I think that's really a lot of what I wanted to say on total cost of ownership, you know, and I think it's probably worth mentioning as well that at the moment there can be long lead times for whether that is, you know, whether for new or certainly used, but on the new car front, and I will, if I may, just give a little plug here to electrics. We do have cars in stock, so take a look, and I'll pop the link in the chat in a moment. But yeah, very happy to take any questions on that. And if there's any really, really hard questions, Euan, I might direct those at you.
Well, honestly, you have absolutely rattled through. I've got a list in front of me of everything I was going to ask about total cost of ownership, and you just went tick, 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 tick. Fantastic. Thank you. That was brilliant. And actually, what we'll do whilst we're chatting is, Donald, if you can put up the poll question to do with total cost of ownership. I think there was actually another one in there, but we'll skip that momentarily and come to the total cost of ownership, because to add to what Gill said, there we go. So cost savings, you know, for EV owners, again, how much are you saving by using your electric vehicle, fuel tax and maintenance, this is, versus a petrol or diesel car? So you've got some choices there. Apologies for our wonderful viewers in the Republic of Ireland. There is a bit of an exchange rate calculations to do that from euros to pounds, sorry. But yeah, if you give us a rough indication, and we'll share the results in a second. But yeah, in terms of looking to get into EVs, obviously the used EV market is an option. I'm aware that there are some HEVRA garages who have used electric vehicles too. Matt, I believe you have a used EV emporium. You've got an eye for a good quality EV as well, and you've got them all polished up and ready to go. I know that some garages offer PCPs on used EVs as well. So, you know, okay, they are cheaper to buy outright, but if you still don't have that money for buying outright, then provided that, you know, credit ratings and all of that, I know, but there is potentially a way to get your hands on them for kind of, you know, spreading the payments monthly, basically. And also, as Gill alluded to, the finding was that a lot of people go for a PCP to lease a car effectively. They don't do the optional final payment at the end, because PCP is where you put down a deposit, you pay monthly payments, and then you have the option to pay a big wad of cash at the end to buy the car, or you just hand it back to the dealer, and then you can either take out another card or just leave it there. If you intend to hand back at the end, it could be that leasing works out cheaper. Isn't that right, Gill?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think, is it these days or for quite some time now, you know, people are starting to prefer the leasing option as well. And that does really help break down, though you almost don't have to think about the upfront cost, as long as, you know, those monthly payments are manageable for your particular circumstances. It's a really great option, and so many people are leasing their electric cars these days.
Absolutely.
And I think it also, on the leasing front, I think it can help overcome the fear of, oh, is battery technology going to improve? Is overall technology going to improve? Well, that's fine, because you can take out 3 or 4 year lease, and then you can switch up to the next best thing if you so choose after that lease period. True.
We actually, something else on the kind of, actually, first of all, the cost saving results, the majority are over £1,000 per annum, which is you know, pretty much on par with what we found. Certainly my old Nissan Leaf, when I was doing 12,000 miles a year. That's the point, the more miles you do, the more you will save, guaranteed. But yeah, I was saving about £1,300 in fuel tax and maintenance, and that was at standard rate domestic electricity prices, admittedly before they went doolally, but that was also before the price of petrol and diesel went doolally too. So that was excluding the fact that I could charge using off-peak electricity at home. I know not everybody can charge at home, but if you do have a driveway or a garage and you do have a smart meter, you can get on to off-peak electricity tariffs that are like 7.5 pence overnight now. And then if you're lucky enough to have solar panels as well, if you don't and you have the cash, definitely worth it. You can potentially charge that car for free and you can run your house for free. So what's not to like? But obviously, that's not options that are available to everyone. I'm fully aware of that, but hopefully that will help some people. Admittedly, people who are in more of a position to be able to help themselves. But yeah, trying to help as many people as we can, I suppose. But actually, another thing as well is there's the used EV loan in Scotland. So I think it's up to £30,000. If the vehicle was sold for up to £30,000, you have a 5-year interest-free loan payment you can get from the Scottish government. So that's another opportunity there. But yeah, total cost of ownership, even in these turbulent times, it looks like EVs are winning out. And in fact, very quickly from the rest of the panel, Wayne, I know that you'd pulled some meter data that you use for off-peak overnight charging your EV. What did you find from that?
Yeah, so I installed a generation meter on my charge point, and all my 95% of my charging has been done at home, all at off-peak at 5p a kilowatt. We used 26,500 kilowatt hours in the last 7 years. So yeah, saved quite a lot of money with that.
Now, I was that fascinated when you told me that I did actually run the maths on it, and I reckon based on 3 miles per kilowatt hour and 40 miles per gallon for an equivalent petrol car, based on your overnight off-peak rate, but then also based on a pre-prices going haywire price of £1.20 per litre of petrol, you saved pretty much 10 grand in fuel. That is phenomenal, and that's without solar panels. That's just using the smart meter trick. But I've just noticed actually someone has made a very good point about in the chat about some EVs not being available to lease in the Republic of Ireland. Terence has said, and you may well be interested in the next webinar we have in our series then, Terence, which is on the 14th of September. And it's buying a new or used EV, what you need to know. And that will include, or should include, a leasing company that covers the Republic of Ireland. So I hope that we'll be able to get you sorted. But that, actually, we do have one last poll before we go to the Q&A. Donald, if you can find that one for us, and we can bring that up for our wonderful audience before we start taking some of your questions. And just whilst Donald's trying to find that poll for us, first question I have, someone snuck in ahead of you all and asked me this on Twitter earlier. So one for the HEVRA team, all three of you are obviously registered HEVRA members. So they were asking about preventative maintenance to avoid failure of older Tesla Model S motors, because some of the oldest, earliest Tesla Model S's did have an issue where the motor started making a bit of a milling noise. Is there any sort of preventative maintenance that could be done that could save that motor and stop it having to be replaced?
We have definitely found replacing the drive unit oil, and shock horror, yeah, an EV has an oil change that needs to be done. But it does need to be done far earlier than Tesla recommend. The recommended service schedule was 150,000 miles. We've suggested to people that they don't push it more past 80 or 90,000, just to help the bearings and things and gears within the motor from wearing out prematurely.
So yeah, keep on top of the oil, and that's you. Actually, this is a fantastic question. I'm glad that we did. Sorry, just before we come back to the motor question, the poll question that's come up for attendees from Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, would you use a HEVRA EV specialist garage? And well, I mean, I'm going to end the poll now because it's clear who's won. Yes, they would, or they wouldn't be too sure. But predominantly yes. The reason I asked this question is because we have a superstar EV mechanic from Scotland. We have 2 superstar EV mechanics from England. And in Matt's case, his company covers all of mainland Britain. But I tried. I mean, let's put it this way. This is the FASTER project. It's Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and the west coast of Scotland. And our panelists tonight are from Scotland, England, England, and England. And this was despite me trying my best to find celebrity EV mechanics of the same just instant recognizability as the three mechanics we have in front of us just now in Northern Ireland and in Republic of Ireland. And I asked the EV associations, I asked everyone, they were like, do you know what? I don't really know any. There are some very talented EV-based mechanics who, similar to Wayne, are doing clever things with like retrofitting and so on. But in terms of someone you can drive up to with your EV and say, this is something wrong with it, can you fix it or can you service it? There's not really anyone at the moment. So if you are a mechanic in Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland, this is a golden opportunity. Step into the limelight, join HEVRA. You'll get all the support that you possibly need. And you will be a lifesaver for EV drivers, just to give them that peace of mind, and also potentially to save lots of money for the rare occasions where something more expensive that a dealer says the whole thing needs to be chucked out and replaced. Turns out it's only a few pence worth of a chip or something that needs to be expertly resoldered or whatever it is. You could be that go-to person. You could be the person that everybody loves. So that is why I set that poll question, and I hope that will inspire someone tonight to join HEVRA from Ireland. But well, obviously there are members already, but to become that kind of celebrity status, if you wish, amongst the mechanics. But over to, sorry, Wayne, were you going to come in on the motor question? Sorry, I think someone was, and then the poll question came up.
I was.
No. Matt covered that basically. Yeah, it's not a big job to change oil in it, so yeah, it's worthwhile getting it done regularly. Yeah, I've looked at a few Model S with the rear motors, and they've come out the factory, and there's been less oil than what should have been in it as well. So it's worthwhile getting it checked.
True. Pete, were you going to add something too there? Sorry.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add in just on that particular vehicle, we have seen some cases where a seal has failed inside and the coolant leaks into the motor and causes a problem just on that particular one. But that would be picked up by routine servicing because it tends to discolor the coolant and it would reduce the level as well. So it's just a reminder that although an EV service predominantly checks rather than changing things, those checks still are important, and things like that can be picked up before it starts to corrode the internals and sort of start causing a big problem.
Excellent. Really good shout that. Looking through the questions, Nori from EVA Scotland says, I never touch the brakes, only in an emergency. Maximum regen, getting your money's worth. There we go. But I think that yeah, obviously make sure that you are brushing them off a little bit just to stop them from corroding. Stuart Morrison, so good they named him right. It's named him twice. On the brakes comparison, there have been cases where replacement brakes are required due to corrosion. Yeah, as we discussed, make sure that you you give them a bit of a cleaning every so often. Just give them a decent application. So a couple of actually there's another electric motor question. Gordon McRae says that there would appear to be a trend towards bearing failure around about 50,000 miles. I don't know which EVs in particular those are. I can tell you now that mine have surpassed that without issue, but is this something that the HEVRA gang have seen? I suppose the Tesla motor question basically answers that too. It's the same response, but is it generally the older Teslas, or are there others that you've seen that have had those issues?
It depends entirely on the make and model. To be honest, we see the odd motor bearing go on BMWs sometimes, but other cars like a Nissan, for example, I don't think we've ever changed a motor or an inverter on a Leaf for any reason. And we're looking after tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of them across the whole network. So they're pretty good.
Good, nice one.
The bearing failure you get in a Leaf or an EMV tends to be within the drive unit itself, because of the sheer torque of the motor, they did chew up the differential essentially.
Yeah, sure. That's the point. Yeah, you want to be, okay, it's fun to plant the throttle because it's that novelty of just the constant torque and the constant acceleration all the way up to full speed. But yeah, if you the more sensibly you drive it, the more it will reward you with increased lifespan and cheaper running costs and so on. But I think everybody goes through that throttle happy phase, don't they? But yeah, another one to do with well, HEVRA again. Helen Taylor asks, how do I get my local garage interested in becoming an EV garage? That is a brilliant question, actually. What recommendations do you have?
This is what we've been trying to achieve for the last 5 years, but it's some of the guys in garages, you know, like Matt and Wayne and many others are just, you know, enthusiastic and keen anyway. Some others are a little bit further behind, shall we say, but I mean, you only have to look from a garage point of view. You don't have to like EVs, because the fact is you only have to look at the sales figures and you think, well, hang on, there's more EVs selling than diesels, and you wouldn't say we're not going to do diesels anymore. So from a garage point of view, it does just make business sense that you need to fix the cars that your customers are going to own. So yeah, apparently there are people who don't like EVs, but you know, if the guys are in that category, then there is just a business case for doing it, to be honest.
One thing that comes to mind, Gill, I suspect that you would be an expert on this one as well, is if they have a Twitter page or a Facebook page, anything on social media, just a deluge of enthusiasm from EV drivers saying, look, I would use you if you would actually learn this stuff. Not that there's much to learn. I mean, Gill, have you got any other ideas from your EV evangelist well, sort of I suppose voluntary EV evangelist days before becoming full-time with LV? Have you got any recommendations from your earlier days of EV driving?
Yeah, gosh, to raise profile or just to get more garages involved and
yeah, to stop the kind of reluctant garages from being reluctant and go, okay, actually, yeah, this is a good thing to do. Did you ever come across that in your experience, or was everyone as enthusiastic as you were almost from day one?
Yeah, I think it's just really, it's just, as with so many things related to electric cars, for so many people, we're still relatively early days, aren't we? And although we're all really in it and enthusiastic, so many people just aren't there yet. So the vast majority of people just aren't there yet. So I think the more that are on any kind of issues or you know, elements of it, the more that we can do to spread the word on social media, you know, blogs and so on. There are so many local and regional EV groups out there on social media, and then of course we've got EVA England, EVA Scotland, you know, Northern Ireland EV Owners Group. I hope there's an emerging one in Wales as well. So it's just, you know, I think just getting the message out there, you know, and you know, and I know I will always do what I can to support as well in my own little way.
Amazing. I'm acutely aware, as I've just been reminded in the chat, that once again, such has been the interest in all of this content that we have overrun. If anyone does need to run, we will not be offended. Thank you so much, everyone. There are a few more questions if you're happy to take them. And if you're watching on YouTube, the recording may end quite abruptly because we're going to run out of recording space. But there's another one for yourself, Gill. Alan Carolyn asks a fantastic question here. Is anyone concerned about the fact that electricity prices have been doing what they've been doing, basically? And it's all to do with the wholesale price of gas, which sets the wholesale electricity price because of gas-fired power plants. And the market does need to be reformed in that regard. But petrol and diesel prices have obviously shot up, but are now kind of fluctuating a bit, and they're maybe heading that back down a wee bit. Do we have concern that electricity prices will only continue to rise, given that providers are very quick to raise prices, and certainly have been over the last couple of years? I would say that your domestic electricity supplier is doing that very reluctantly, I should add. They're at the mercy of the wholesale market. They don't want to be raising those prices, but it's because of the price. They've already bought and paid that electricity, and that price has been set by the wholesale market. But what's the general feeling with the total cost of ownership calculations, Gill? What's the latest?
It's going to, there's no doubt, I think it's going to have an impact. It's going to have some kind of effect, isn't it, as we continue to see escalating energy costs. I worked out fairly recently that in terms of sort of domestic energy pricing, we'd have to reach something like 65 pence per kilowatt hour off peak for it really to become an issue with, for electric car charging at home off peak overnight. It is, I think, as we alluded to earlier, the situation is different for public charging. We're already seeing those kind of prices, but then it helps to remember that actually at the moment, certainly most people do most of their charging at home off peak overnight. And OZEV, have recently said in their brilliant publication about, overcoming the common misconceptions about electric vehicles, that trend they believe is set to continue. But it's something to be aware of. But I don't suppose that fuel prices are going to really come plummeting down anytime soon. So for the foreseeable future, at least, it's going to still be the case that electric cars, in many cases, will be far cheaper to run. And then, of course, we need to factor in that with the zero emission vehicle mandate coming in 2024, there's going to be more electric cars coming onto the market. There should be, certainly. And that should, in theory, bring those upfront sticker prices down. And that's really where we need to get to.
Absolutely. And I would say as well, again, not everybody will have this as an option because of cash, because of savings and finances available, but also, because you may not have a roof, you may be in a flat. So it's a ceiling, it's not a roof you can stick solar panels on. But obviously solar panels, the output greatly reduces in winter, but in summer, someone in the chat earlier, sorry, I've forgotten who it was, but was it Dave Forrester? I might be wrong, mentioned they'd added 75 miles of range to their EV using solar power today. And when I saw that come in, I kind of gave a wry smile because I was charging mine up today. It was very slowly but surely adding tens and tens and tens of miles of free lecky. But obviously in winter that changes a bit. If you have the means to get solar panels, especially with electricity prices being what they are at the moment, get them and you'll not regret it. There's also the likes of Ripple. So you can buy a share of a community-owned wind farm, and then the power that's produced by that share, the amount that gets sold for on the wholesale market, minus the actual cost of producing that electricity, is added as savings onto your electricity bill. It's a semi-complex thing, but that's the most sort of succinct way to try and explain it. So basically you get savings on your electricity bill from owning a bit of a wind farm. So even if you did live in like a middle floor flat and couldn't have solar panels, that's something that once that wind farm comes online, you would be able to benefit from. But these are not options that are available to everyone, but they would certainly help to reduce the cost of EV ownership, even if electricity prices went up even further, because heaven forbid we got to the stage where it was 65 pence off peak without there being a massive, massive reform of the electricity market, because everyone would be bankrupt. What you would see is that people who have solar panels would still be able to charge their car at 0 pence per kilowatt hour, and that you cannot do that trick with petrol or diesel. But then again, not everybody has a solar panel, so it is a tricky one. There's a really good question again for the Cleevely gang. First of all, actually, Alan, Carol, and again, very quick 5-second question for Matt. So, Matt, you were saying it's about 30% of your business is EV versus 70% petrol at the moment. Are you seeing a steady increase in the EV versus ICE ratio, or is it fairly static at the moment?
It's been a continual increase from when we set the business up 4.5 years ago. So when I was initially, we would see 1 or 2 EVs a week. Now it's actually, there's a day I saw in our diary, 23rd of the month, we've got 6 Teslas in that day for servicing MOTs and various repairs. So it's constantly increasing. And that 30% is probably going to be for this year, but I'd expect it to rise for next year. The amount of Model 3s that we're seeing at the moment that are now due for an MOT, mine is due being 3 years old now. So that's a whole influx of work that we may not have got last year because it was still too new for an MOT. So yeah, I constantly expect it to increase. And I work with Pete and with the RMI and various other industry bodies and trade bodies to help drag the rest of the aftermarket garages up to the kind of levels that we try to aspire to, because it's important that independent garages understand and act on this now, because there's a massive opportunity that we could get a real jump on franchise dealerships that aren't ready for the influx of EVs that we're seeing. True.
Another really good question. I'm trying to fire through as many of these as we can because there's some really good questions. Again, for the HEVRA gang. So Jim Blair and Marcus Clifford have asked much of a muchness the same thing. Are the panel seeing any shortages of EV components at the moment? Is it affecting business?
Well, we are getting some delays, getting some parts from France I'm well aware of. I don't know if you can add to that, Matt. You're probably closer to that end than I am.
It's not just an EV thing. It's a petrol, diesel, it's a Brexit, it's a whole shit show of things going on problem where it doesn't matter what the powertrain is of the vehicle, there's a shortage of parts and difficulty of getting certain components. We found an EV aftermarket supplier on the continent, and we actually import tens of thousands of pounds worth of stock in any one time to make sure that we've got a decent stock of 2,000 lines in our parts department in Cheltenham, which has been created since you came and visited us, actually, Euan. So nice. We're doing everything that we can to ensure that we've got a parts supply chain still available.
And then as well, you know, there is the possibility that somebody got a bit too happy about the performance of their EV and wrapped it around a tree. And then, of course, you end up with the likes of EV breakers in Northern Ireland who will salvage EVs and sell parts that are still intact. So yeah, there's you do get written off EVs, crash salvage EVs that you can get parts from. It's a case of knowing where to look, and yeah, EV breakers seems to be a decent option for various different fixtures and fittings if those are required. A very good question from Ron Bagnall. I can't get onto a cheap electricity tariff at the moment. They're not accepting any new customers. Any suggestions? I mean, the things that come to mind for me are, if you're in Scotland, you'll have more choices than Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland. Unfortunately, I don't know what the situation is with some of the suppliers in Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland at the moment. But if you're in Scotland, I would say probably phone Octopus. And if you have a smart meter, that'll make things easier. If you've got an EV as well, then you should hopefully be able to get onto Intelligent Octopus, if not Octopus Go, which is still going to give you a cheaper rate overnight. I know that there's other suppliers, like the RAC has an overnight electricity tariff. There must be more. Anyone else here, Gill, in particular, are you aware of any other overnight tariffs and electricity suppliers who should be taking on new customers at the moment?
Oh, crikey, I would have said Octopus, and I've heard also that it's a case of picking up the phone to them. Yeah, I think the only other suggestion I would make is if you haven't exhausted all the options, then look on rightcharge.co.uk, and they'll give you all the EV tariffs.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Again, also, just to add to that, Euan, I would say don't rule out Economy 7. I know it's considered a bit old-fashioned, but I have Economy 7 because I do too many miles to charge my car in 4 hours. So I have Economy 7 and I've had it for years, and that suits me pretty well. So
awesome. Oh, Good Energy apparently have an overnight tariff as well. Thank you, Kay, for that in the chat. But no, that's a really good shout about Economy 7. Who'd have thunk it? Hey, there we go. Old tech coming back for new use. Another kind of 2-in-1 question for you. Is there a big cost a few years down the road, says Andrew O'Mullane, with replacement of battery coolant, the EV version of the timing belt, he says. And then on a similar note, John McLean says, has anyone heard about bespoke, expensive, ultra-low conductivity coolant being required for an e-Niro? So coolant replacement, is there anything specific that needs to be done? How expensive is it?
Generally speaking, it is a drain and refill of sorts. It's not like take the battery out and tip it upside down to get the coolant out sort of thing. It's a relatively straightforward procedure. There are various valves and pumps and things within that system that need to be in the right positions to fill it and drain it. Otherwise, obviously, if the valves are shut, you're only draining out a little bit, if that makes sense. So there are special procedures involved, but it's not as involved as something like a timing belt or something like that. So regarding the low conductivity coolant, if the vehicle's under warranty, then obviously we have to recommend what the manufacturer recommends. The coolant in the vast majority of cases doesn't actually touch any high voltage components. So the power electronics that need cooling are all sat on an aluminium plate, and the coolant runs the other side of the plate. So in the majority of cases, the conductivity of the coolant actually wouldn't make any difference anyway, because it's not touching anything that conducts. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm also hugely skeptical about coolant changes. I think manufacturers build that in just to justify high service charges at set points, and it's just a good earner. And again, it's not just an EV thing, it's something that they've done traditionally anyway. So I'm just a bit of a cynic on that, and good servicing will monitor the quality of that coolant. And as Pete said, it's doing less work than ever before, because it's passing through aluminium housings and isn't going through massive heat changes as it would do in an ICE vehicle. So if anything, it's kind of irrelevant or less relevant than ever before.
Good shout, good shout. Now, I am painfully aware that we're about to run out of recording time on the Zoom chat. Oh, sorry, on the Zoom video recording. So we'll probably stop that in just a second. But there are a couple of good questions. So what we'll do is we'll hold on, everyone who's watching live, for a faster after chat where we answer the rest of your excellent questions. And hey, yeah, if there were some really good questions you were wanting to hear answering and you're watching this on YouTube, you should have watched it live. See you on 14th of September for the next Faster webinar, which is all about buying or leasing a brand new EV and what you need to know.